Hello, everyone. This is Kim Langling from the MO2VATE team. I am here with Lynn Smith. She is coming to us today from Spain, and I'm going to be asking her some questions about her winning article that she submitted to the 5th edition of the MO2VATE magazine, which is a global magazine. Lynn, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to share just a little bit about you, and then we're going to hop right into it. Lynn helps women heal their hearts so that they can attract and create lasting, healthy soulmate relationships in a way that is natural, nurturing, and fun. So they stop feeling stuck, confused, lonely, and unfulfilled. She knows that if she can do it and help others to do it, then you can do it as well. Lynn makes a difference by helping you make a difference. Her mission is to have a positive impact on reducing divorce, domestic violence, self-harm, and suicide. Lynn, thank you so much for joining me today on this interview for MO2VATE magazine.
Thank you, Kim. I'm really delighted to be here.
Your article is incredibly powerful. And I've got to tell you, folks, if you have not had a chance to subscribe to MO2VATE and check out this 5th edition, you should. She's got a very powerful story and one that resonates with me personally. And I told her off mic prior to this, I said, you know what, this might be a tough one. And I was pretty honest about it. But Lynn, I want to ask you to just share a little bit about your article and your journey. And I'm going to let you take the lead on that because it's your story.
Well, I think you gave a little bit of a heads up. It is quite a harrowing story. It really started when I was 15 years old. And for me, at that moment in my life, I was a very competitive swimmer, and there was this one particular day where I went to my swimming club, and there was the public side of the pool, and then there was the swimming club side of the pool, and we got to know some members of the public, and one of the guys there was a guy probably in his 30s who got to know quite well. And one day he was saying, if you want to have a lift home, I'll give you a lift home, because the weather was really pouring down with the rain. And so naively I accepted that, in good faith. And that ended up being a very, very bad decision for me, because on the way back home, he pulled into a lay-by, and it was a very dark evening. And what proceeded next was he seriously sexually assaulted me, and there's no other word for it. I was raped by him. And in those days, this was in the 70s, I was brought up as a child that was seen and not heard. And I had a very strict upbringing where my parents were, not very emotionally connected, let's say. They had a very volatile relationship themselves. And I didn't have a close relationship with either one of them. So I didn't feel as though I could tell them about what had happened. And so I just suppressed it and didn't tell anybody. And I almost forgot about it until about 3 years later. I had a similar incident where different guy, different circumstances, but it was a friend of my then boyfriend who wanted to go and get some, in those days, vinyl LPs, long playing records, from the halls of residence, to go back to the student accommodation. And I was the only one at the time that could drive, and I drove him there. And this was a similar scenario where, I naively went and put myself in a vulnerable position where I was alone with him, and he gave me a drink, which I later discovered was drugged. And I collapsed, and although I was aware of what was going on, I was incapacitated, and there again took place a serious sexual assault. So you can imagine, on the back of those experiences and not feeling able to speak about them, how that then negatively impacted my future relationships.
I can understand that. And my question for you right now is, did you seek counseling at all over the years since that time?
At the age of 42,
so
I rang rape crisis.
That you carried that weight.
Yeah, and you know what the awful thing about that was? I wanted to be able to tell my husband and my daughters about what had happened to me. And I think what what instigated that was my oldest daughter was going through puberty. She was 11, 12 years old. And I wanted to be able to protect them. You know, I wanted to be able to tell them what happened so that they could come to me if anything like that, you know, ever presented itself. So I rang Rape Crisis, but the awful thing about that was I had the initial interview with the woman, and she said at the end of the interview, she says, "I'm sorry," she says, "there's a 12 to 18 month waiting list for ongoing counselling, and it took me all those years to be able to speak." To then be told I'd have to wait another 12 to 18 months to get counselling was devastating to me.
Yes,
And
it would be.
to be honest with you, when the letter came to let me know that the counsellor was available, I told them to give it to somebody else, because in my mind, all I wanted to be able to do was tell my husband and daughters what had happened. And in the meantime, I had plucked up the courage to tell them. So in my mind, I thought, well, that's job done, which probably was another naive decision.
The thing is, you know, and I've been in a similar situation that you have, and I kept quiet and had that suppressed for a good 15 years. And when it does come out, because it will, you can't suppress something like that forever. It's a difficult thing because you feel, at least I felt, me personally, felt all of a sudden I was overwhelmed with memory, you know, and very detailed memory, even sounds and sights and smells.
Yeah.
And those little triggers could just put me at such a level of anxiety and then depression. And I did seek counseling. It took a while, and it took several people strongly encouraging me to. But suffice it to say, I live with PTSD due to that, post-traumatic stress. And I'm assuming that you live with that as well to some level. Personally, on your end, since you did not seek counseling, how is it that what are your coping mechanisms, or what have you done to help yourself to heal instead of suppress?
Yeah, good question. I mean, initially the impact was, I mean, I was ready to contemplate seriously suicide at the age of 18 years old, and I had the means to do it. Because at that point in my life, I was a veterinary nurse. I was in accommodation above the surgery, sharing with another veterinary nurse. And I knew where the keys to the poisons cupboard was. I got as far as opening that poisons cupboard door, and I knew what drugs would kill me. And I got as far as taking one from the shelf and looking at it. And I think it was a thought of my younger brother, actually, that stopped me from going as far as taking my own life. Because at the time, my mum had just left my dad. My dad was very volatile and very upset, heartbroken, very unpredictable. And we didn't know where my mum was. And I didn't want to leave my brother in that situation of, you know, having that to cope with, as well as losing his sister.
Yeah.
So that, I think, was the thing that saved me at that moment in time. And I think it was just then you know, it took a while. It took a while to progressively let go of stuff, because I can remember, you know, having a promiscuous phase. I can, you know, and I think we all know girls, if we've not been that girl ourselves, that look for love through sex, you know, and that was me. I put my hand up and I did that. Then I had a period where, you know, I was in good relationships, and then toxic relationships, and then good relationships and toxic relationships. And I just self-sabotaged the good relationships because I just didn't have that sense of,
Right.
or even be aware of the lack of self-worth and self-love that you know, was going on within me. So, you know, it's more or less going into my 40s, you know, and after that, I suppose that conversation with that counsellor initially, that catapulted me into that journey of self-healing and becoming more aware of my thoughts, my behaviors, and my actions, and knowing and learning more about the tools for being able to release negative emotions, and learning more about, you know, what it is that creates self-love, and what is this self-love, and what does that look like, and how do I do that, you know. And it was gaining all these tools of awareness that allowed me to release negative emotions, that allowed me to look at myself in the mirror and think, my gosh, you're an amazing woman. And I can really do that now, and love myself, you know. But I'm actually 61 years old now. It took me a long time, and I don't want other women to have to go through the decades of that journey that I went through. You know, you can go through this in a relatively short period of time. And I suppose it was just my journey that gave me the empathy now to help other women through that, because we all can, you know, meet men and you know, through dating sites or through matchmakers, but that isn't going to help you long term create a healthy, happy, fulfilling relationship if you haven't done the work on yourself.
Right.
You know, that healing of the heart is such an important part of knowing and becoming more aware of how to release your past baggage. Otherwise, you're just going to attract the same man, but you know, he's just in a different body.
Right.
Type
Right.
relationship, and experience the same problems and patterns of behavior that you did previously.
Now, there's a line in your article that I wrote down, and you said that you had to have there's that time frame that you had to, it's like you were wearing a suit of armor. And I've often described it that way to myself, only I say, or about myself, I say I've built a tremendous wall. I'm a professional wall builder. And the thing with armor and walls is none of that can be let out because you've got it firmly in there, but then nothing can be let in either. And that's the hard one, to also not only look at yourself and realize, no, I am worthy. I am not weak. I am strong. You know, I'm not broken and damaged. All those different negative thoughts that go through your head from people that have went through these circumstances. So it's tough for me anyway, tough to let some of that wall come down. Did you find the same with your suit of armor, as you mentioned in your article?
Yeah, I think, you know, when we're in what I call default energies, in other words, you know, that the default energies are not necessarily healthy energies. So the default feminine energy for me was, you know, being in that anxious, needy, desperate state, you know, where I was chasing guys, and you know, went through that promiscuous phase of lack of self-love and self-worth. But on the other extreme is, once you have built up a certain amount of healing, you can go to the other side of the coin and then become very hard. And like you say, that for me was wearing that suit of armor, where you don't let you only let people in so much, you know. Otherwise you keep them at arm's length, because you don't want to get hurt again. You don't want to risk anybody getting close enough to you to ever put you in that situation where you feel that vulnerable or that hurt ever again. And that was what it was like in my relationship with my ex-husband. You know, I was with that lovely guy for 23 years. You know, he was a fabulous man, but by the time I met him, I was 26, nearly 27. You know, all I wanted at that stage in my life was somebody to keep me safe. That was my highest top priority. I just wanted to feel safe. This guy showed up. He was a fabulous guy. He loved me. He kept me safe. He protected me. He kept me secure. But my heart wasn't fully open. So in that relationship, you know, quite a lot of the intimacy, there was intimacy, but you know, I was quite cold and frigid and confused in that relationship. So although we did, you know, have two gorgeous daughters in that relationship, the actual sex act itself was not fulfilling for me, you know. it's not that I didn't necessarily not enjoy it, but it was more, you know, quite often laid back and just,
Yeah.
you know, go. It was like, okay, you know, it wasn't abhorrent, but it wasn't something where I felt great passion or lust or aliveness.
Right, right.
Yeah. So, you know, and I didn't know until I've done, you know, more work on myself that that's what I was searching for all my adult life, you know, was to feel that passion, to feel that aliveness, to feel that lust and that vibrancy, and to really enjoy sex, you know, and want somebody to rip my clothes off and want to rip his clothes off, you know, be in that sort of energy. But I didn't realize until, you know, as I say, I've been on my own personal journey, that I was contributing to me not having that because I was, you know, protecting my heart. My
Right.
heart wasn't open. And so, yeah, I had to learn that, you know, to attract that, I had to relinquish control and open my heart.
So you have a business now that's called Hearts Entwined. When did you start that?
2016, I think 4 years ago, but it was on the back of a very long journey of being in, you know, that personal development space of coaching and mentoring people about peak performance and mindset and personal power. And then I sort of niched into the area of relationships on the back of that, because when I look back at my life, I just thought, well, you know, I can connect the dots now, and this is what I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah. So do you feel that your journey is just going to continue, and it's all going to continue in this positive light? You're obviously helping people, helping women, I'm assuming mostly women, if not all women. Where do you see your journey progressing from here?
I mean, you know, I've got this really big desire to contribute back, you know, and as well as make a big impact in reducing domestic violence, um, divorce, self-harm and suicide, because all those things come on the back of poor relationships. You know, I've got this big desire, this big, huge goal where I want to, you know, be a part of something that's creating safe havens or retreats or education for women that have been through sexual violence, you know, whether that's on the back of sex trafficking, whether that's on the back of war crimes, you know, and being raped as a result of going through those, you know, in the environments in some countries, you know, that's still going on today. You know, that's my ultimate big mission and vision, is to contribute back and help women that are still currently stuck in these horrible situations against their will, where they're going through these sorts of trauma on a daily basis, and need to know there's hope and another way, and a way not only to survive and thrive, but, you know, become alive,
Right.
and be able to live your life knowing that that's something that was in your past, yes, but there's ways to heal it, and there's ways to live a happy, fulfilling, alive life on, you know, despite that. The
Right.
past doesn't define your future.
I was just going to say, you don't have to let your past define you. It can mold you and shape you, but it's all up to you on how you use that. You know, I look back on my journey, and, you know, obviously it's not anything you would wish upon anyone, but if I had not been on that journey, I would not be able to share with other people who have been there or are there, and to provide, like you mentioned, that light, that hope, because that's so desperately needed for so many that we know nothing about, you know. And I think what you're doing is wonderful, because you never know who you may reach. You may not be working with this person directly, but they might find you, you know, through social media or something. They might stay quiet, but they're watching, and it's providing them hope and light, and you might not even know it. So it's amazing, I think, what you're doing, and the journey that you have had. Pretty darn bumpy. It's a, you know, and that's putting it really lightly. Bumpy journey, but I appreciate everything that you're doing, and your goal is amazing. I absolutely love that goal. So right now, where you're at right now, how would you rate your life right now? You know, from darkness to light. What's the scales on that?
It's phenomenal. You know, I've gone from being a woman that's, you know, flipped from being very needy and desperate in, as I say, that negative feminine energy to, you know, flipping to the negative masculine energy where I was, you know, very guarded and, you know, hardened, because we've all got both energies within our body. You know, we're quite often defaulting to our masculine energy when we feel the need to protect ourselves, and that's why it's there. You know, if there's any perceived threat, we need to be able to default into that to protect ourselves, but you don't have to live there. And you know, to now being in a very, what I call my positive, most healthiest feminine energy, which is, you know, being that playful woman, being that sensual woman, coming from a place of grace and fulfillment, and living a life where you know, I'm attracting, you know, great relationships. You know, I've got a relationship where I'm feeling alive, fulfilled, you know, actually, you know, experiencing that passion and intimacy in a relationship that I think we all want at the end of the day. You know, if we're honest with that, we all want that.
I think it's wonderful that you can sit there and say you went from, it's just one extreme to another, really. It seems like, you know, such a dark place, and now you're living in this place filled with light and joy and self-love, because you can look in the
Absolutely.
mirror, you know, and say, hey, I'm pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that takes some practice, you know, because I mean, if you're not used to doing exercises around self-love, or you're not have had the awareness previously to look in a mirror and be comfortable with what you and who you see, you know, that can be quite a challenge in itself to start with. But you know, with anything, you know, practicing certain exercises gets you there, and it doesn't have to take years of therapy to do it. You know, you can do it in a relatively short period of time.
That's self-affirmation. I think it's very powerful. And you're right. Looking at yourself in the mirror, it is awkward. It is very awkward, you know, when you first start doing that. And because I'm still not comfortable doing that. But I make myself do it, and I have little sticky notes, you know, on my wall above my laptop of self-affirmations, you know, like you are worthy, you are not weak, you are strong, things like that. And they do help. They do help. And so,
I
what
think,
I want to ask you to leave our viewers and our listeners with one bit of advice that they could walk away with today and start implementing in their own lives.
well, I think probably we just touched on it. It's probably an exercise around self-love. And if you're not actually comfortable with, or never heard of, you know, or even had the awareness to think, you know what, perhaps I've never thought about whether I've got any self-love or not, but I've not been attracting, or I've not currently got a great relationship, so that might have something to do with it. And you find that it is a difficult thing to look in a mirror and actually say that to yourself with any conviction. Then look at yourself, but think of yourself as being that little girl. You know, think of you as a child, and give that little girl, you know, the love that she wants. You know, look, imagine you're that younger version of yourself, and I think we can all do that.
Wow, thank you. Soon as you said, look at yourself as your, you know, that little girl, that younger self, that's a hard one to do too at first. I was recently asked that question not long ago. We're just in a conversation and said, well, Kim, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? Because I'm 53 now. So what would you
Yeah.
tell your 18-year-old self? One that had just went through something very traumatic. What would you tell her? Just one thing. And the only thing that came to me was, you will be okay.
Yeah. You
And
will. You'll always be okay. It's living in the now, you know, looking in the now, because that's all we've got. You're
right,
safe. So it's remembering that, you know, right at this moment in time, because that's all we've got, is right at this moment in time is the now. What happened to you in the past has gone. Release it. it happened. It doesn't necessarily have to define you and how you live your future unless you choose to let it define you.
Right.
And your future hasn't happened yet. So, you know, there's no point in worrying about that because it hasn't happened.
Right.
So, you know, just think about always consciously remembering that all you've got is this present moment, and in the now you are safe, you are secure. And as I say, as a self-love exercise, what worked for me was, I mean, it's going to probably end up, you know, especially if you have been through trauma in your past, you wanting to really well up and release a lot of tears, but know that those tears are healing tears. You know, it's good for you to get it out, and that's all part of the healing process. So don't worry about getting upset, you know, and give yourself a pat on the back, actually, you know, if you let that out.
Right. Oh, you know, and I've told people before, if you need to go out in the backyard and scream and wail, do it.
Yeah.
Get that dark crap out. You know, you need to scream and wail, do it. You need to sob and cry, do it. Let yourself do it because it's a huge release. It really is.
It is. Because
Thank
if we
you
suppress
so
it,
much. I mean, I have truly loved this conversation. I could probably sit here and talk to you for a lot longer. Thank you so much for sharing your story here, as well as in the MO2VATE magazine. Lynn Smith from Hearts Entwined. Thank you so much. And I want to share a screen real quick so we can let everybody know out there watching about MO2VATE magazine. It is a global magazine. It is the Small Business Bible. It is the micro and small business owners' go-to business Bible, written by small business owners for small business owners who want to lead in their respective industries. So check out MO2VATE magazine at motivatemagazine.com. Thank you again, Lynn, for joining me today. And I hope I see more articles from you in MO2VATE magazine in the future. I loved your article.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thank you, audience, for spending the time to listen. I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day, Lynn.
And yourself, Kim. Thank you very much.